Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Captain Kyle Randall stood at the viewport of the Federation flagship Invictus, his steely gaze fixed on the approaching alien vessel. The stars stretched endlessly before him, cold and indifferent to the impending violence. He clenched his jaw, pushing down the familiar knot of dread in his stomach. Another battle. More lives lost. But duty came first. Always. "Sir, the Altari ship is within range," his first officer, Commander Chen, reported from the tactical station. "Their shields are up, weapons hot." Kyle nodded, never taking his eyes off the sleek, predatory lines of the enemy craft. "Hail them. One last chance to surrender." Chen's fingers flew over the console. After a tense moment, he shook his head. "No response, Captain." "Very well." Kyle's voice was ice. "Prepare boarding parties. We take that ship." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as his crew rushed to obey. Kyle allowed himself a small, grim smile. His reputation as the Ruthless was well earned, but few understood the weight of it. The countless sleepless nights, the faces of the dead that haunted his dreams. He pushed the thoughts aside. There would be time for reflection later. Now was the time for action. "Boarding teams in position, sir," Chen reported. Kyle nodded. "Initiate docking procedure." And Chen. He fixed his XO with a hard stare. "No unnecessary casualties. We're soldiers, not butchers." "Aye, sir." The deck shuddered as the Invictus latched onto the Altari vessel. Kyle strode toward the airlock, his hand resting on the phaser at his hip. He'd lead this assault personally, as always. The moment the airlock cycled open, all hell broke loose. Phaser fire lit up the cramped corridor as Kyle's team pushed forward. The acrid smell of ozone and burning metal filled the air. Kyle ducked behind a bulkhead, returning fire. An Altari soldier fell, green blood spattering the deck. He forced down a pang of regret. This was war. There was no room for hesitation. They fought their way deeper into the ship, encountering fierce resistance at every turn. Kyle had to admire the Altari's tenacity even as he cut them down. As they neared the bridge, a blur of motion caught Kyle's eye. A lithe figure vaulted over a barricade, twin blades flashing. His breath caught in his throat. She moved like liquid lightning, her jade skin gleaming with sweat. Raven hair whipped around her face as she cut down two of his men in the blink of an eye. Their gazes locked across the chaos, and for a heartbeat, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Kyle had never seen eyes like hers, bottomless black pools that seemed to hold entire galaxies. In that instant, he knew she was no ordinary soldier. This was Illyra, the infamous Altari assassin he'd been warned about. The moment shattered as a stray bolt nearly took Kyle's head off. He dove for cover, his pulse pounding. When he looked again, Illyra had vanished. "Fall back," he ordered, gesturing for his men to regroup. "She's leading us into a trap." They retreated, regrouping near the airlock. Kyle's mind raced. They needed a new strategy. "Sir!" Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "We've detected a power surge in their engine core. I think they're—" The ship rocked violently, throwing Kyle off his feet. Alarm klaxons blared. "They're scuttling the ship!" Kyle roared, scrambling up. "Everyone back to the Invictus now!" They ran for the airlock, the deck bucking beneath their feet. Kyle brought up the rear, making sure his team made it through. Just as he was about to cross the threshold, a blade whispered past his ear. He whirled to see Illyra charging toward him, her face a mask of determination. Time slowed. Kyle's hand went to his phaser, but he knew he'd be too slow. This was it, the end of the infamous Ruthless. At the last possible second, Illyra's foot caught on a piece of debris. She stumbled, her strike going wide. Kyle seized the opportunity, tackling her to the ground. They grappled furiously, each fighting for dominance. Kyle was stronger, but Illyra was lightning quick. Her knee drove into his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. "Captain!" Chen shouted from the airlock. "We have to go now!" Kyle managed to flip Illyra onto her stomach, pinning her arms behind her back. She snarled and thrashed, but he held firm. "You're coming with me," he growled in her ear. With a grunt of effort, he hauled her to her feet and shoved her through the airlock. He dove through just as the hatch slammed shut. "Disengage!" Kyle bellowed. "Maximum thrust." The Invictus broke free just as the Altari ship erupted into a brilliant fireball. The shockwave rattled the bridge windows, but they were safe. Kyle sagged against the wall, breathing hard. His side ached where Illyra had landed a solid hit. Speaking of, he turned to find her glaring at him, hands now bound behind her back. 2 security officers flanked her, phasers trained and ready. "Take her to the brig," Kyle ordered. "Maximum security protocols." As they led her away, Illyra's eyes never left his. There was hatred there, yes, but something else too. A flicker of curiosity? Kyle shook off the thought. He had a prisoner to interrogate and a report to file. But first, "Damage report," he called, making his way to the captain's chair. As his crew rattled off statistics, Kyle allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. They completed the mission with minimal casualties and even managed to capture a high-value prisoner. Not bad for a day's work. Hours later, Kyle stood outside the brig, steeling himself. He'd reviewed Illyra's file extensively. Elite assassin, highly trained in multiple forms of combat, responsible for the deaths of at least a dozen Federation officials. And now, she was his prisoner. He nodded to the guards and entered. Illyra sat on the narrow cot, her posture relaxed despite the energy field containing her. Those fathomless eyes locked onto him immediately. "Captain Kyle Randall," she purred, her voice low and musical. "The infamous Ruthless. I expected someone taller." Kyle's lips twitched despite himself. "And I expected the legendary Altari assassin to be quicker on her feet. I guess we're both disappointed." A flash of irritation crossed Illyra's face, quickly masked. A momentary lapse. "It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," Kyle replied dryly. He pulled up a chair, sitting just outside the force field. "Now let's chat." Illyra raised an elegant eyebrow. "About what? The weather? Your atrocious fashion sense?" Kyle ignored the jab. "Let's start with why you were on that ship. It wasn't a military vessel." "No?" Illyra's voice dripped innocence. "How careless of me to board the wrong ship. I was simply looking for the nearest spa." "Cut the crap," Kyle snapped. "You're too valuable an asset to waste on a simple trading vessel. What was your real mission?" For a moment something flickered in Illyra's eyes. Surprise? Respect? Before her mask of cool disdain slipped back into place. "My mission?" She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "My mission, Captain, was you." Kyle's blood ran cold, but he kept his face impassive. "Me?" Illyra's smile was razor-sharp. "The great Kyle Randall, scourge of the Altari, butcher of Balara IV. Did you really think we'd let you live forever?" "Balara IV was a military installation," Kyle growled, "and I gave them every chance to surrender." "Keep telling yourself that," Illyra spat, her cool facade cracking. "It helps you sleep at night, doesn't it? Knowing the blood of thousands is on your hands?" Kyle surged to his feet, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, raw fury threatened to overwhelm him. But then he saw it, the tiniest flicker of fear in Illyra's eyes. She was goading him deliberately, trying to provoke a reaction. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to relax. "Nice try," he said softly. "But I've made my peace with who I am and what I've done. Can you say the same?" This time, the flash of emotion on Elira's face was unmistakable. Uncertainty. Doubt. Kyle pressed his advantage. "Why are you really here, Elira? What's your endgame?" She stared at him for a long moment, those galaxy-deep eyes searching his face. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "To end this senseless war." The words hung in the air between them, charged with unexpected honesty. Kyle found himself leaning closer, drawn in despite his better judgment. "How?" he asked softly. Elira's gaze never wavered. "By any means necessary." The intensity of her stare sent an unexpected shiver down Kyle's spine. He became acutely aware of how close they were, separated only by the shimmering force field. He cleared his throat, taking a step back. "We'll continue this discussion later. Get some rest." As he turned to leave, Elira's voice stopped him. "Sweet dreams, Captain. I'll see you there." Kyle glanced back to see her lounging on the cot, a wicked smile playing at the corners of her mouth. He shook his head, trying to ignore the way his pulse had quickened. This woman was dangerous in more ways than one. As the brig door slid shut behind him, Kyle ran a hand through his hair. He'd come here looking for answers, but he'd left with even more questions. Who was Elira, really? What game was she playing? And why couldn't he shake the feeling that everything was about to change? Kyle paced the length of his quarters, unable to shake the memory of Elira's piercing gaze. Sleep eluded him, his mind a tumultuous sea of conflicting thoughts. He paused at the viewport, staring out at the star-studded void. A chime at his door startled him from his reverie. "Enter," he called, composing himself. Commander Chen strode in, his usually stoic face creased with concern. "Captain, we need to talk about the prisoner." Kyle suppressed a sigh. "What about her?" "The crew is unsettled. Having an Altari assassin aboard, even in the brig, has everyone on edge. There are whispers of mutiny." "Mutiny?" Kyle's eyebrows shot up. "That's a serious accusation, Chen." The commander nodded grimly. "I know, sir, but the sentiment is real. They're questioning your judgment." Kyle's jaw clenched. He'd expected resistance, but this... "Call a general assembly. I'll address the crew directly." Hours later, Kyle stood before the assembled crew in the mess hall. Hundreds of eyes bored into him, a palpable tension hanging in the air. He took a deep breath. "I know you're all concerned about our guest. I understand your fears. But I give you my word. Elira poses no threat to this ship or its crew." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Kyle pressed on. "She may be our key to ending this war. I'm asking you to trust me as you have countless times before." "With all due respect, sir," a voice called out, "how can we trust her? She's the enemy." Kyle's eyes found the speaker, Ensign Reeves, young and fiery. "The same way they once said we couldn't trust the Vulcans or the Andorians. Progress requires us to move beyond old hatreds." "She's not just any Altari," another crewman argued. "She's an assassin. How many of our people has she killed?" The crowd grew restless. Kyle raised his hands, calling for calm. "I understand your concerns, but I give you my word. I will not allow any harm to come to this crew. Elira remains under constant guard. The mess hall doors hissed open, cutting him off mid-sentence. All eyes turned to see Elira herself stride in, flanked by two burly security officers. A collective gasp went up. Kyle's hand instinctively went to his phaser, but Elira made no aggressive moves. She simply stood there, her obsidian eyes sweeping the room. "Your captain speaks the truth," she said, her melodic voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent room. "I am here to end this war, not prolong it." Kyle found himself moving toward her, drawn by some inexplicable force. "What are you doing here?" he hissed. "I didn't authorize this." Elira's lips quirked in a half-smile. Sometimes, Captain, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. Before Kyle could respond, she addressed the crew again. I know you fear me. You have every right to. But I ask you this. How many more must die before we realize this war benefits no one but arms dealers and politicians? Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Kyle saw uncertainty flicker across many faces. I offer you my skills, my knowledge to help bring peace, Elira continued. Judge me by my actions, not by the color of my skin or the planet of my birth. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then, from the back of the room, a voice called out, How do we know this isn't some Altari trick? Elira's gaze found the speaker. You don't, she said simply. But ask yourselves this. If I wanted to destroy this ship, why would I be standing here talking instead of slitting throats in the night? A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. Kyle felt the tension in the room ease, just a fraction. He stepped forward, placing himself between Elira and the crew. I've made my decision. Elira stays under guard but with limited access to non-sensitive areas. Anyone who has a problem with that can submit a formal complaint through proper channels. Dismissed. As the crew filed out, many still muttering amongst themselves, Kyle turned to Elira. That was a risky move, he said quietly. She shrugged, a fluid motion that drew his eye to the graceful curve of her shoulder. Sometimes risks are necessary, Captain. You should know that better than anyone. Kyle found himself fighting a smile. Come on, he said. Since you're out and about, we might as well make use of it. Time to see what you can really do. The training room was mercifully empty when they arrived. Kyle tossed Elira a practice sword, keeping one for himself. Show me what you've got, assassin, he challenged. Elira's eyes glittered with amusement. Careful what you wish for. Ruthless. They circled each other slowly, muscles coiled and ready. Kyle struck first, a probing attack that Elira easily deflected. She countered with a lightning-fast series of strikes that forced Kyle back a step. He grinned, exhilaration coursing through him. It had been a long time since he'd faced an opponent of this caliber. Their blades met in a flurry of strikes and parries, the clash of metal on metal echoing through the room. Kyle found himself marveling at Elira's grace, the fluid economy of her movements. Minutes stretched into an hour, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. They were both breathing hard, sweat glistening on their skin. In a sudden burst of speed, Elira feinted left and then swept Kyle's legs out from under him. He hit the mat hard, the breath whooshing from his lungs. Before he could recover, Elira was on top of him, her practice blade at his throat. Their faces were inches apart, both panting heavily. You fight like a true Altari warrior, Elira breathed, her eyes locked on his. Kyle swallowed hard, acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. And you move like a goddess, he murmured. For a heartbeat, the air between them crackled with electricity. Then Elira rolled off him, offering a hand to help him up. Kyle took it, pulling himself to his feet. Not bad, he said, striving for a casual tone. But I was going easy on you. Elira's laugh was like music. Of course you were, Captain. Keep telling yourself that. As they put away the practice weapons, Kyle found himself stealing glances at Elira. The way her ebony hair clung to her neck, damp with exertion. The flecks of lean muscle beneath jade skin. He shook his head, trying to clear it. This was dangerous territory. Same time tomorrow? Elira asked, a challenge in her voice. Kyle nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As she sauntered out of the training room, he let out a long breath. What the hell was he getting himself into? Days passed, settling into a routine. Elira remained under guard but was granted more freedom to move about the ship. The crew's hostility gradually gave way to grudging acceptance, then curiosity. Kyle found himself spending more and more time with her, ostensibly to keep an eye on her. But if he was honest with himself, he was drawn to her sharp wit, her insight, her everything. Their sparring sessions became the highlight of his day, a complex dance of blades and unspoken tension. Each bout left him exhilarated, off balance in the best possible way. But beneath it all, doubts gnawed at him. What was Illyra's true agenda? Could he trust the feelings growing between them? And what of the Altari fleet, growing ever closer on long-range sensors? One night, unable to sleep, Kyle made his way to the observation deck. To his surprise, Illyra was already there, staring out at the stars. She turned as he entered, a sad smile on her face. Couldn't sleep either. Kyle shook his head, moving to stand beside her. Too much on my mind. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the vastness of space stretching before them. "What do you see out there?" Illyra asked softly. Kyle considered the question. "Possibility," he said finally. "New worlds to explore, new people to meet, if we can just stop trying to kill each other long enough to look up." Illyra's hand found his, her touch sending a jolt through him. "That's why I'm here," she whispered. "To stop the killing, to find a better way." Kyle turned to face her, his heart pounding. "Why should I believe you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Illyra met his gaze unflinchingly. "Because I've seen the truth in your eyes, Kyle Randall. You're not the monster they paint you as. You're a man who wants peace as badly as I do." The use of his full name, spoken so intimately, broke something loose inside him. Kyle pulled Illyra close, one hand cupping her face. "This is a bad idea," he murmured even as he leaned in. "The worst," Illyra agreed, her breath warm against his lips. Their mouths met in a searing kiss, months of pent-up longing pouring out. Kyle's world narrowed to the feel of Illyra in his arms, the taste of her lips, the soft sounds she made as he deepened the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both gasping for air, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "We can't," he began. Illyra silenced him with another kiss. "We can," she whispered. "We must, for both our peoples." Kyle knew he should resist, should remember his duty, the stakes involved. But as Illyra took his hand and led him toward his quarters, he found he didn't have the strength or the desire to fight it any longer. The door had barely closed behind them before they were in each other's arms again, hands roaming, clothes falling away. Kyle marveled at the silken texture of Illyra's jade skin, the way she arched into his touch. They fell onto the bed in a tangle of limbs, passion overtaking reason. For one night there was no war, no duty, no divided loyalties, just two beings finding solace and connection in each other's arms. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Kyle traced lazy patterns on Illyra's back. "What happens now?" he murmured. She propped herself up on one elbow, her obsidian eyes serious. "Now we fight. For peace. For a future where this," she gestured between them, "isn't impossible." Kyle nodded, pulling her close. "Together?" Illyra's smile was radiant. "Together." As they drifted off to sleep, Kyle felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them united. But in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered doubts. Could he truly trust Illyra? What secrets was she still keeping? And as the Altari fleet drew ever closer, would their newfound bond be strong enough to withstand the coming storm? Kyle jolted awake, his heart racing. The ship's red alert klaxon blared, shattering the peaceful cocoon he and Illyra had created. He turned to find her already alert, her obsidian eyes sharp with focus. "It's time," she said simply. They dressed quickly, years of military training kicking in. As they rushed toward the bridge, the ship rocked violently, nearly throwing them off their feet. "Report!" Kyle barked as they burst onto the command deck. Commander Chen's face was grim. "Altari fleet, sir. They've opened fire without warning. Our shields are holding, but barely." Kyle's mind raced. This was too soon, too aggressive. Unless... He glanced at Elira, searching her face for any hint of betrayal. She met his gaze steadily, her jaw set with determination. "It's not what you think," she said quietly. "This isn't the plan." Before Kyle could respond, another blast rocked the ship. Sparks erupted from a nearby console. "Return fire," Kyle ordered. "Target their weapon systems. I want to disable, not destroy." As his crew scrambled to obey, Kyle felt a chill run down his spine. This was the moment of truth. Everything hinged on what happened next. "Sir," Chen called out, "we're detecting weapons fire from inside the ship." Kyle's blood ran cold. The mutiny. Of course they'd choose now to strike. "Security teams to all critical areas," he commanded. "Chen, you have the bridge. Elira, with me." They raced through the corridors, the sounds of battle echoing from all directions. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a group of armed crewmen. "Stand down!" Kyle shouted, his phaser raised. The leader, Ensign Reeves, sneered. "No more orders from you, Captain. We're taking this ship back from you and your Altari whore." Kyle's finger tightened on the trigger, but Elira was faster. In a blur of motion, she disarmed two of the mutineers before they could blink. "I'll handle this," she said, her voice ice. "Go, save your ship." Kyle hesitated for a split second, torn between duty and the urge to protect her, but Elira was right. He had a responsibility to the entire crew. "Be careful," he said, locking eyes with her one last time before sprinting toward engineering. The ship shuddered again as Kyle fought his way through pockets of resistance. He tried to reason with the mutineers where he could, but was forced to stun several who wouldn't stand down. Finally, he reached engineering. The scene inside was chaos. Loyalists and mutineers locked in a firefight, with the warp core dangerously close to overload. Kyle dove into the fray, his phaser blazing. "Enough!" he roared. "Can't you see you're destroying everything we fought to protect?" His words seemed to give some pause, but others pressed their attack. Kyle found himself backed against a console, outnumbered and outgunned. Just when all seemed lost, a familiar voice rang out. "Stop this madness!" Elira stood in the doorway, her clothes singed and torn, but her presence commanding. She strode forward, ignoring the weapons trained on her. "You want to know the truth?" she demanded. "Fine, I'll show you." Before anyone could react, Elira placed her hands on the nearest console. Her eyes closed in concentration, and suddenly the air shimmered around her. Kyle watched in awe as holographic images sprang to life. Classified Altari transmissions, battle plans, evidence of a conspiracy that went far beyond this ship or this war. "Your leaders have been lying to you," Elira's voice rang out. "Both sides. This war was engineered by those who profit from conflict. We are all pawns in their game." The images shifted, showing the devastation wrought on both Federation and Altari worlds. Children crying in the rubble of bombed-out cities. Soldiers returning home broken and scarred. "Is this what you're fighting for?" Elira challenged. "More death? More destruction? Or will you stand with us and demand peace?" A hush fell over engineering. Slowly, weapons lowered. Kyle saw confusion, then understanding dawn on face after face. He stepped forward, placing a hand on Elira's shoulder. "She's right," he said softly. "We have a chance to end this, here, now, but only if we stand united." For a moment, the fate of galaxies hung in the balance. Then, one by one, the mutineers laid down their weapons. Kyle let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said. "Now, let's save this ship." With the crew working together, they managed to stabilize the warp core and repel the Altari attack. As the last enemy ship retreated, a cheer went up throughout the Invictus. Kyle turned to Elira, 1,000 questions in his eyes. "How did you—" She gave him a weary smile. "I told you I had secrets. That was the last of them. My people have technology far beyond what you've seen. I was sent here not just as an assassin, but as an envoy, to find someone on your side willing to listen, someone with the courage to stand up for peace." Kyle shook his head, marveling at the layers of deception and truth. "Why me?" Elira's hand found his, squeezing gently. "Because beneath that ruthless exterior beats the heart of a true leader, one who cares for his people, who questions orders, who sees beyond simple us versus them thinking." Before Kyle could respond, Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, you're needed on the bridge. We're being hailed by both fleets." Kyle straightened, his captain's mask sliding back into place. "This is it," he said. "The moment of truth." Elira nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Together? Together." They made their way to the bridge, the crew parting respectfully before them. As they entered, all eyes turned to Kyle. He took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "Open a channel to both fleets." The view screen flickered to life, showing the grim faces of both Federation and Altari admirals. "Gentlemen," Kyle began, his voice steady, "I think it's time we had a long overdue conversation." What followed was the most intense negotiation of Kyle's life. He laid out everything, the conspiracy, the lies, the true cost of this senseless war. Elira stood beside him, offering insights and corroboration. There were moments of fury, of disbelief, of accusations flying, but slowly, painfully, understanding began to dawn. "We've all been played for fools," the Altari admiral finally admitted, his shoulders sagging. The Federation admiral nodded gravely. "The question is, what do we do now?" Kyle stepped forward, his voice ringing with conviction. "We choose a different path. We lay down our weapons and start talking, really talking, about our fears, our hopes, our common ground." "It won't be easy," Elira added. "There's too much history, too much pain, but it's the only way forward that doesn't end in mutual destruction." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Then, miracle of miracles, both admirals nodded. "A ceasefire," the Federation admiral declared. "Effective immediately. And talks. Real ones this time." As the transmission ended, the bridge erupted in cheers. Kyle felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the burden of years of war, of impossible choices, of the nickname Ruthless. He turned to Elira, his heart swelling with emotions he couldn't begin to name. She smiled up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We did it," she whispered. Kyle pulled her close, not caring who saw. "No," he murmured, "we've only just begun." In the days that followed, the Invictus became the epicenter of a new era of galactic diplomacy. Representatives from both sides shuttled back and forth, hammering out the framework for lasting peace. It wasn't easy. Old hatreds died hard, and there were moments when it all threatened to fall apart. But each time, Kyle and Elira were there, bridging the gap, reminding everyone of what was at stake. One evening, as they stood on the observation deck watching shuttles come and go, Elira turned to Kyle. "What now?" she asked, echoing her question from that first night together. Kyle smiled, taking her hand in his. "Now we build something new, a future where our children won't know the meaning of war, where exploration and cooperation replace conquest and suspicion." Elira's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Children, hmm?" Moving a bit fast, aren't we, Captain? Kyle laughed, pulling her close. Hey, I'm just thinking long term. That's what good leaders do, right? As their lips met in a tender kiss, Kyle marveled at the twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. From enemies to lovers, from soldiers to peacemakers. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But as he held Elira in his arms, the stars stretching out before them full of possibility, Kyle knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And there you have it, folks. As you've probably noticed, today seems to be all about sci-fi. It's been a while since we've ventured into the final frontier, hasn't it? I hope you enjoyed this cosmic tale of love, war, and green-skinned assassins. If not, well, don't worry. Your ship hasn't been assimilated by the Borg just yet. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Did the story hit your warp core just right? Or did it fall flatter than a tribble pancake? Let me know what worked for you and what didn't. And hey, if you've got any ideas for future stories you'd like to hear, I'm all ears, Vulcan or otherwise. Remember, in space, no one can hear you scream, but they can definitely read your comments. So don't be shy. Until next time, may your phasers be set to stunning and your universal translators never fail you. Live long and prosper, and I'll see you in the next story.